I can't stop doing that thing with my eyelids now. We were just talking about, oh my God, are you drinking wine tonight too?
You know what? I am having a hot mess of a night. I've got like the cold from hell. The
Oh my,
kids have brought home everything. So I'm drinking water, wine, anything that might have some kind of antioxidant in it. I'm just trying it all. I don't care.
hey, if you could turn water into wine, we've got a whole other podcast coming.
We could do it.
Saved by Morgan. Listen, okay, but let's go back to this eyelid thing. You were just
Yeah.
telling me, and now I can't stop touching my eyelids, that you've got like the hack that I've seen this thing that you were just talking about, but I didn't know they actually worked well because I thought that you could see them and I can't see yours
Huh.
on your eyes. Like,
Well,
this is
you're
really
giving away
cool.
all my secrets. You're giving away all the secrets to this podcast right
But like,
here.
this could be like a major sponsor. Like,
I know.
apparently, people, there's a trick to looking more awake, and it really does work. So I think you're gonna have to follow us on social media if you want to see what it is. I'll make
We'll make you put them
Morgan's
on, Andrea.
bill all. But it looks so good. I'm having a hot mess night too. I just got into like World War III with my son, who just screamed at me. I don't think he's ever been as angry as he just was, and I heard every expletive, words I didn't even know he knew. And I think this was over, like, I can't even really remember, but the stakes were low. I'm pretty sure this was over, like, get out of the shower.
Something super important, right?
Really, I mean, man, but, like, holy cow. So I'm, like, shaking in my boots over here.
Maybe you need a glass of wine, not for antioxidants, more for relaxation.
I need something. My God. I mean, I'm used to like grown men yelling at me, but my 9-year-old? JC. Speaking of turning water into wine. Oh my gosh, Morgan. I mean, I
Yes.
love on the days when we actually are a hot mess. I feel like those are the days we probably have our listeners relate to us most, because I'm sure the majority of the people who listen to this show are like, join the club, sisters. You guys think you're a hot mess. You have no idea the waters I'm navigating over here. So, friends, you're in good company. What we're actually going
I
to talk
literally
about.
I can
Yeah.
have, like, barely open my eyes right now. Can you see? I'm, like, so
But is
and not
that is that like you, or is that what you've got
my
on?
eye. You know what? It's TBD. I don't know. It's this cold. I'm just got, the eyes that are just, like, watering at all times. So here we are.
I have to say though, Morgan, looking at you right now, it looks like you're giving me like like I'm like trying to do your eyes back at you. Like it looks like you're
Ooh.
like it looks like you're seducing me through the screen. Like I realize
I
it's
do it every day
likely
then.
not. Yeah. But like it's very I don't know what it is. It's yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Today what we're talking about is that weird place that a lot of people live in before they're ready to admit to themselves that things are not okay in their lives and in their marriage. And this is a land that I am far too familiar with. And we're going to talk to an expert who's going to walk us through, number one, why do we do this? And number two, it's worse for us than we think. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. So I actually used to do this, and it's far from healthy, but man, it is so much easier than telling the truth. And what we're talking about is the art of pretending that you're not crumbling on the inside.
Yeah, the problem with this, I'll call it art form, is, that I'm fine, everything's fine kind of a thing, is that it causes so much more harm than good. And that's exactly why we're going to get into it today with a new guest to our show, someone that I personally cannot wait for all of you to meet. Please welcome How Not to Suck at Divorce listeners, Hilary Rosenberg, to our show.
Hi. Happy to be here.
Welcome,
Thank you for
Hilary.
having me.
I can't wait. So, listen, listeners, she's a licensed therapist here in our hometown of Chicago. She focuses on a lot of attachment theories. And if you're thinking about it like I am, I'm thinking, what the hell does that mean? Okay. So now I'm reading this from her website. So I'm going to sound really informed, you guys. Attachment styles are formed during early childhood development and fall on a spectrum from insecure to secure attachment. Understanding one's attachment style provides tremendous insight into why we feel the way we do and how we regulate our emotions in relationships. Essentially, it gives an emotional blueprint for how we bond and relate to other human beings in friendships and romantic relationships. Phew! I read it
Woo!
all, got through it, but guess what? I'm excited because I'm going to learn some things myself, and I have some thoughts on what I see legally, and I can't wait to jump into this topic.
I also think it's important to mention to our listeners that not only is Hillary an expert on this, but Hillary actually went through a divorce herself, by the way. So she's going to help us understand number one, why we do this, why we pretend that everything is okay when it's not, and why we need to stop doing this. So, Hillary, hey, welcome to How Not to Suck at Divorce.
Thank you for having me.
Why? My question is why? Why is it our instinct to pretend that we're not crumbling inside, like Andrea said? Why is that there?
I think like it's so interesting because when I talk to clients who are going through divorce or have gone through divorce, one of the things they'll say is they can actually think of the time, like pinpoint the time when it initially started to happen. And it is like when you can go back and you're more regulated, you can see exactly what you did. But when you're going through it, it is so emotionally charged that it's too great. So the immediate thing is to like push it away. Like you can call it, perhaps somebody might call it denial, but it's like that thought goes into your head that's like, it's not just like, oh, they're having a bad day. It's like, oh my goodness, I think I made the biggest mistake. And how am I going to get out of this? And what a nightmare. And then that thought was so huge, like you're going to climb like Mount Everest, that immediately you push it away and rationalize it. And it's like that's just the seed to continuing that theme.
It sounds like to me what you're describing is something that we feel terrifies us. And so it's like, no, 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 no. Like, maybe I should go climb a mountain. And someone's like, bitch, you're not about to climb a mountain. And you're like, you're right, you're right, you're right. I'm not going to climb a mountain. Is it like we're trying to protect ourselves?
I mean, I think it's definitely protecting yourself, but it's like I mean, it depends. It's so individual on like what might be coming up for someone. But like, the common themes are that you made a mistake, that it's so difficult what you might end up doing to the kids or letting people down or even like your community. I mean, there's just these like plethora of things, like what it actually means for you moving forward that you might have, this might not work out.
Hmm.
So, question for you. I always joke around because I'm the one on the podcast that always talks about woo woo. I say woo woo shit for lack of a better term. It's horrible. Because I've got this legal brain, and it's kind of like to me, it's black and white, it's strategic, etc. So I'm not saying this is woo woo at all, but I'm trying to wrap my head around something maybe I don't understand. But you're really relating a lot of the way that people are behaving at this point in, them trying to figure out their situation to what they went through in childhood. How does that work? What does that do for someone?
Oh, well, I mean, if you're going to unpack it to the point of attachments, then I think like, what I typically do with clients is I'll take them through to find out what their attachment style is. So most of the time, either, especially if you're going to go through a divorce, most of the time you probably fall under an insecure attachment. In fact, more than 50% of the people fall under an insecure attachment. That is how they go about managing emotional dysregulation. And the way that shows up in, especially when you're dealing with something that like you don't want to face, is how you're going to process it. So you might like immediately go into no, 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 no. Like if you're anxious attachment, you're going to go into a mode of like wanting to make it all better. And like maybe I'm gonna like work extra hard over here. If you're more avoidant, you might spend way more time at work or on the golf course or like what have you, you know? So it's it actually plays a huge role in how you actually manage your emotional regulation and how you're going to interact with the person who you are potentially wanting to divorce. So, or even at this stage, like, is it even something that could be reconciled? And oftentimes people don't come into counseling until it's years later. So, like, this whole dance has gone on for quite a while.
Interesting. Wait, hold on, Andrea. I've got 2 more follow-ups. I cannot
Oh.
stop there. Um, so Hillary, are you kind of saying that what they've likely done throughout from childhood all the way through, it's really the same kind of behavior that they've seen their entire life when they're starting to get into an issue in a marriage or a
Oh,
breakup?
especially if there's gonna be, like, emotional dysregulation. Like, I'll give you an example, and this happens a lot with more anxiously attached people and clients that I work with that if if they are like, they have become, like, really magnificent people pleasers their whole life. They might be the good child, they have, "What do I need to do better?" But this personality also is, like, an unbelievable overthinker. So they will go into, I need to figure this out. And this creates this whole other world inside their head of, well, if there's a problem, I need to figure out how to make this better. Even though like there's like a mystery to solve. So like, and that's something that actually does form really, early, early in childhood. And the part that I'll like relate to attachments is that they're they're actually pretty disconnected from their body at this stage.
Oh,
They would go,
okay. Okay, so dovetailing right into that, because I don't know what these different attachment styles are. What are they, and how do you figure out which one you are?
there's lots of tests you can
There's a BuzzFeed quiz for that,
right,
Morgan. I'll
totally.
send it to you
There's
after this.
tons of like
Please.
ones you can take, but it doesn't take long to sort of figure it out. And there's a great book called Attached. But what it basically is like if you were raised in an environment where, let's just say, like, for example, a common one was if you have an addict for a parent or a narcissist for a parent, weird buzzword, or an unavailable parent, the majority of the time, you learn that in order to get your needs met, that you will have to go outside of yourself first to see like what the parent's doing, and then you'll get your needs met. So that sets you up for like more of an anxious or an avoidant. What an anxious will do is, why people like end up anxious or avoidant is like, you know, it can go either way. It's actually the same thing, just a different presentation on either end. So, like, a more anxious person might be more people pleaser, whereas an avoidant will be like, no, 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 I can't rely on anyone. I have to do this on an island by myself, and you're only allowed to come, you know, by invitation only.
Okay, so that is interesting, and I know, Andrea, you have 1,000 questions too, and I'm just kind of hogging this, but
No, I'm not. I'm just thinking about myself over here. I'm just
Oh
self-diagnosing.
no.
Don't mind me.
I what I was going to say, what you just talked about, Hillary. So I had a client recently, long-term marriage in the middle of a divorce, and I think kind of what you just talked about, the avoidant, et cetera, was probably this client's MO since childhood because this client was struggling so hard. And I kept saying to this client, you need like a community around you. Where are your friends? Where's your family? And this client was so avoidant that he refused to tell anyone, even in his inner circle, that he was going through a divorce. What he'd rather do, and he did, was just shut everybody out. So he suffered in misery for such a long time. And it was heartbreaking for me as his lawyer because I know that if he had just reached out to some of his closest friends that he just shut out, they probably would have helped him through the process a lot better.
Easier said than done.
Yep.
Especially if you're
Yep.
emotionally dysregulated. So this is where it gets to be tricky. And like you said, it's great to reach out to a friend, but especially if you're, you know, if you're firing in a place of like divorce or stress, you're really going to be working from like your like limbic brain. Like you're going to be offline a good amount of the time. And I think like a therapist would be able to recognize like what that is and the strategies to help you learn how to get regulated so that you can then reach out to people. So that's one of the benefits of understanding attachment, you know, attachments in this process and is how to use it to your advantage and how to recognize when you're becoming dysregulated because you're going to go into
You know what?
one.
You know what? I love what you just said because I'm gonna start using it, like, offline. You know what, Andrea? I'm offline today. I'm dysregulated, I'm offline, like, don't call me. Don't send me an email, like, my brain is offline.
The amount of times that I use the term dysregulated in my house, like, I think it's gonna have to, like, be, dismantled because, like, no once you embrace the term dysregulated, I feel like we just use I'm like, "I'm dysregulated right now. I need a minute. I need a break." That's one of the things that my nine-year-old screamed at me a minute ago. I was just saying, Hillary, that my nine-year-old was screaming at me before we started recording because I, God forbid, asked him to get out of the shower. And he's like, "I need a break. I'm dysregulated." Followed by you blank, 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 but, whatever. Here's what I wanna do. I wanna go back to put this in the right frame of mind for our listeners. So let's illustrate a situation here. So you've been married for 15 years and you are so deeply unhappy and you avoid going home. You hate when plans with friends end because now you know that you've got to just, be with your spouse. You don't know what to do. The idea of actually thinking about this and admitting how unhappy you are feels terrifying and it makes you want to vomit. And you will not talk about it. It feels like this thing inside of you that you cannot admit, yet you are suffocating. Why Why is it, Hillary? I want to go back to that why. Why is it so scary to admit I've got to look at this? Like it feels almost like a horror movie. Like it makes me think of that Stephen King movie It about the clown, where it's like you never say the clown's name. You don't talk about the clown because then the big monster is going to come out.
So I'll tell you the two buzzwords I hear when like people are in this place and I can even say it for myself that by the time you've done this dance in your head where you're like it's not that bad or marriage is hard and you push yourself back or you rationalize and you go back and forth you've got like an entire like set of like an orchestra going in your head on both sides with all different types of like viewpoints that when somebody comes in and they say I'm confused or they're numb. But confused might be like the
Yeah.
main one I hear. It is like the buzzword to
Mhm.
me of like, oh gosh, we have to like strip this down because you how could you possibly know what to do if you've got 50,000 different voices going on in your head, all in different directions on both sides? Because you've done this so much that you know, you've lived it, you're rationalizing it, you're like, you've come up with strategies at this point. You're like, you might even think you're complicit in it because you've, behaved as if you're like fine in something that you're not really fine in. So there's this like shame in it as well. So by the time somebody comes in, it's like they really, and if I'm like, well, what do you like about your partner? What do you not like about your partner? That's just way too simple. You're not even able to like you would think that would be like a straight answer. Like when you've gotten
Mhm.
to that point of confusion, that's actually a really difficult answer. Like really difficult thing to answer.
One thing you said just now that I see legally a lot when people come in and they're confused, because I get a lot of confusion. And I'm not one that pushes divorce at all because I think it's such an important decision to make, but you have to be in the right frame of mind. And I really, as a divorce lawyer doing it for so
Right.
long, I do think that I'm able to judge right out of the bat when I talk to someone, whether they're ready or not. in general, but I do get a lot of confused people that come in. And what I'm wondering from your point of view, Hillary, is like, where's their brain? Like, what's happening in their brain at that moment when they're either talking to you about their confusion or they're in talking to me about it?
I mean, the brain has gone into like most likely like if they're sitting across from you or they're talking to you, now it's definitely heightened and is in like what we call like reptilian brain. And so it's fight, flight, or freeze. It's like, and I can tell you like personally, I remember the first time I sat down with like the divorce lawyer in my own case. I don't remember a word she said to me.
Yeah, we say
Mhm.
that. We say that all the time. We always talk about that. Yeah.
Nothing. Like she could have talked gibberish. She could have said anything to me. Like it was just that was such a feat just to make it there. I'm pretty sure she showed me some stuff with like color coding on it. Like, like that's all I could remember. There's like different shapes on it of the different types of divorce I could get. I'm like, that's all I left with. I was like, really, which is not unusual. Like
No.
you have to like, to give like an example, an extreme example, but during like Hurricane Katrina, when they were having people leave, they were giving them simple instructions like go down the street, take a right, and get on the bus. They couldn't process it. They had to keep telling them over and over and over again. And that is your brain when it is in a state of trauma. And if you're thinking about and making a step or even trying to talk to someone, your brain will will go offline to a degree.
And legally, what Andrea and I always say, you said it best because you've been through it yourself as a therapist and as a divorcee. You came into a lawyer's office, you sat with them because you knew that was the next best step. And you walked out as a professional yourself who does this every day, and you had no idea what you talked about. And so, what I want you to know for the listeners out there, if that happens to you, that is okay. Don't be ashamed by that. I always say, if you walk out after this meeting and can't remember a word we talked about, that's normal and that's okay. And let's just meet again when you kind of calm, because sometimes after you get that first meeting out of the way, everything starts to calm down where you can actually focus.
Morgan, this what you just described is the exact reason why we wrap our show with the recap and the action steps, because even just listening to a podcast about this topic, not only is there a lot of information, but when our brain hears something that we don't necessarily like, we turn off to protect ourselves, right? It's like the kid who sticks their fingers in their ears and like la 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 la, because you don't want to hear this stuff half the time. And we know that.
Mm.
So I also think, and Hillary, I'm very curious to know your opinion on this since you work with people going through this stuff and you went through it yourself. How important is it that before somebody calls a divorce attorney, they call a therapist to get their head straight so that they're in the best mental state possible so they know what they want and they know how to absorb the
I
information?
mean, so obviously I might be biased, but but I would definitely say like that it is an excellent move and for multiple reasons. One is that it's not your friend. So you're going to have somebody who's safe that you can talk to, that you're not going to worry that somebody else might find out. Also
Okay.
going to get, feedback that's, more objective for you as opposed to a friend might give you. It also gives you a place to start to unpack where you are. Are you, I mean, I think this initial piece of somebody coming in is just meeting them exactly where they are. Are they in a place where they want to work on their marriage? Are they so checked out they've already decided? Or are they
Hmm.
like, how to even like be able to help them navigate their thoughts to be able to go into the next step. I mean, the more you talk about it, and we talked about this like world that goes on internally in your head and how difficult it is to know what the right move is if you haven't been able to sit with it and feel what it feels like. So even having a space where you're able to have your truth come out is giving you some place to exhale that this is what it feels like to live in my truth in this space.
Going back to the pretending then that we're okay when we're
Correct.
not. How damaging is that process? Because I'm assuming that pretending that you're okay is going to stop the motion of you even seeking help, right? Or do you find that people are like, "Oh, yeah, 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 I'm gonna go see someone and talk about
Yeah.
it." And then they don't end up
I
doing
mean,
it.
okay, so like I'm going to play both sides on this, right? Because on the one hand, it it is damaging, correct, but it's also a survival tactic. So you might just have to get through where you are, and you're doing the best you can with the strategies that you have. And so there's no shame in like showing up to like, I'll give you an example for like a client who, got so far in her marriage where she accepted an open marriage but didn't really want it. Convinced
Mm,
herself she was totally okay with an open marriage. And when she first came in, it was this like, I'm totally fine with it. She had lived the persona for so long that like she had convinced herself that she was fine with it, only to get to the part where she was able to recognize that that actually wasn't her truth. That was what she had told herself.
wow.
So can I ask both of you a personal question?
Sure.
I mean,
It's
I
worth
guess. It'd
All
be
right.
awkward if I said no.
Right? I know I heated up where you couldn't say no. So both of you went through a divorce, and
Mhm.
both of you, when we started talking about this topic, I can tell it's kind of near and dear to your heart, meaning you've been through the process. So can you both tell our listeners about, how long it took you to come to the realization of, okay, the I'm fine, this is fine, everything's fine, it's not fine. How long did that go? Because I'm sure people are out there being like, I've been sitting here for years and I still can't do it. Or, I've been feeling this feeling for 2 weeks and it's awful. What were your stories looking like?
Mm, I pretended for a long time. But I think we talk about that a lot because obviously, for people who know my story personally, when I got so sick with my panic disorder, I was going to look everywhere else but my marriage. And obviously, it's not the marriage that made me sick. I had this in me, and that was, the irritant. But one of the things that Hillary said at the very beginning, Morgan, was she was talking about how you start you go to that place of, okay, if it is my marriage, how do I explain it? It's like you're opening a book and you're skipping to chapter 47 instead of like taking it one step at a time. I don't know how to take anything one step at a time. Right? Like I'm like, let's get to the end. So it's like, oh my God, this isn't right. And then I'm gonna live in a place in a ditch, and I'm gonna have like all these kids, and I'm not gonna have anybody, and I'm gonna be alone forever, and maybe I'll get a cat and a vanilla scented candle, and I just got really overwhelmed, and I just said, "No. No, no, no. I'm not gonna that's not my life." I judged myself, there was shame, there was guilt, and because I think with my situation, everything pointed back at my childhood, which made it even scarier. So I swallowed this until, I mean, it was actually eating me alive. But I'm curious, Hillary, you're much more emotionally informed than I was. So, how does a therapist navigate this? Like, here's where you can show off how healthy you are.
Well, actually, at the time, I wasn't a therapist. So that was a career changer for me after my divorce. However, it's kind of what's interesting though is that what I could say about that is like, and as you were saying, and I was trying to like imagine, like, where was I, during that time where I started to realize there was something wrong. And the immediate like reaction was to focus on something that was more tangible. Like, I always had this like it's the dishwasher conversation. It's so much easier to put it on like it's the schedules, it's the job, it's money, it's like anything but the real thing. And it really wasn't something that I don't even think at the time I knew how to address.
Did you try to fix things then? I'm just curious. I mean, obviously don't share more details than you want to, but, like, did you go through, like, maybe we need to spice things up. Maybe we need to have another baby or buy another house. Like, did you do all that fixing stuff?
100% did
You did.
all of
Okay.
it, like, through the iterations of trying and doing therapy and you name it, and there were times where I actually have to say, like, I thought that it was gonna work and then sort of reverted back to some things that I think getting to this place where you recognize that it's more core. It's just stuff that isn't actually fixable in a relationship. So getting to that place, which I think that's like, you know, I had a sense, I just couldn't it like no matter what we like, it wasn't going to take us there. Right. And I think people do have a knowing of it. It's just terrifying to actually say it out loud that there's not something you can fix. I mean, I tried everything. I tried like you name it. Like I was gonna try it first to like, you don't want to like not, right? Like throw everything at it to see
Right.
what works. And so if I answer that question.
You made me think of something in my own marriage is, one of the things that Morgan said at the beginning was, how long do we pretend for? And I did it for years. I mean, my entire marriage was not good. And I did that in the very beginning. Like, I did I think we just need a book. And there was a book about one particular topic, and I'll let everyone figure that out, but I bought every single version of this book. Like every "Oh, maybe you try this and maybe you do that and maybe you can work on it this way and maybe and it the more that you put focus on it and the problem just got bigger and more uncomfortable and worse and worse and worse. It's funny because I think that for me, because I think my attachment style is just fucked, whatever that one was. It's
Marriage through attachment style,
I
just
think it
asking
is.
for a friend. Okay.
I mean, it was like I didn't even realize, "Girl, this is not gonna work." It's like I started blaming myself. It's like, "Well, then I must be broken." There's no way
Or
that it could be
or
that.
I must be crazy, right? Because I hear that all the time.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Well, and I think that
I'm
is the
feeling
danger
crazy.
of like not starting to talk about it because you find out like it's only you're
Go
the
in your
only
head.
person. And a lot of times people know really early on in marriages that they made a mistake. And that is like really feels painful for people. Like, how could I possibly like have, uh, like 2 months in, like this is
Morgan, how often do you hear that?
Oh, all the time, all
Yeah,
the time. They recognize, but they stuck it out and, a million kids later and 10, 15 years down the road, and it's
we
just
all do
never
it.
gets better. But, I wanna say a few things, which is I'm a big proponent of therapy legally before you come to a divorce lawyer if you can figure it out. I know some people are hesitant about it. I know that if you're in a marriage that's kind of rocky, that it might feel awkward to suddenly come out and say, I'm going to go start therapy because your spouse may be saying, why? Like, I don't understand. Is it us? Whatever. What I always say to people is, talk to your spouse about the fact that you're changing and that you don't really understand yourself. Bring it back to you as to why you want to go to therapy. We all know well and good why you're going to therapy. You need to figure out your life. But
Mhm.
if you blame it on you or you say it's you going to therapy, it makes it a little easier, and that your spouse may not think that it's related to your relationship in general. The other thing I want to ask is, Hillary, you said that over 50% of your patients or your clients have kind of the same attachment style. Like there's one kind of prolific attachment style. Remind me what that
so
was
actually
again.
to clarify it, there's four attachment styles. There's secure, there's anxious, avoidant, and there's disorganized.
Oh, okay.
Disorganized is probably bigger than people realize, but that's like one where it falls under insecure. It typically shows up where there's been like complex trauma or some sort of trauma. It means that you are uncomfortable being too close to someone and too far away from them. So you're like, it's like really the worst. Like you're always in this too close or too far, right?
I think I've been in a relationship like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know.
I love that as you're saying that, Hilary, I'm thinking, that sounds like me. And then you go, it's the worst. I'm like, oh shit.
Actually, a lot
I'm
more
screwed.
common than people realize. And almost there's no shame
Oh,
in it. What
good.
actually helps is like when you can identify like how you're showing which I mean, sometimes in one relationship or even a
Ugh,
marriage, you can show up as anxious, and the next one you can show up as avoidant. So it
I'm so glad you just said that.
depends on what your relationship is like as to how you're presenting.
Interesting. So you can switch your attachment styles is
It's
what you're
malleable,
saying.
which is why I love working on it. So you really can't
Absolutely.
change like the attachment you get from birth, like entirely. Like it will show up in like extreme times of stress. However, you can learn what they call an earned secure attachment style. So like circling back to that like whole other piece you had, Andrea, where you're like, what is the danger of like living this other reality where you're out of alignment with yourself? Like
Yeah.
that's the danger is that you're like not going to actually get into a secure attachment place where you feel like you're in alignment with your life when you've slowly like become normalized to something that's so not in your truth and where you want to be in life. So if you're showing up in all these areas, like your brain and your body are completely working against each other, and it over time will show up as like a physical ailment, whether it's a headache or like
Yeah.
I couldn't move
Mhm.
my neck one morning. Like maybe that's a sign. like
Yeah.
right like I was way more likely to do a whole bunch of like go to the chiropractor and like do all the things than really address the fact that why am I so stressed and what have you, which I think is common, you know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I just finished a mediation with a client, and her relationship with her ex was very complex. And the ex, very difficult ex. And she said she really didn't see it until about 6 months in. And it was kind of in a really tough part of the relationship. And she stuck it out. And she was talking about the fact that she normalized so much of the behavior that it was like when big things happened, she kind of was like, "Oh, it should, put it under the rug," because there were so many minutia problems happening on a day-to-day basis. It was kind of like ping pong. It was like, just keep the balls in the air. Keep the balls in the air, and we're not going to focus on these big problems. And so I'm seeing now what you're talking about with these attachment styles, but I want to ask you, we're a big proponent on this show about action
Mhm.
steps. And so if you could give us, kind of shoot us in that direction. So if someone is really trying to work their way to not pretending anymore, figuring out like why they keep saying, I'm fine, everything's fine, we're all fine. What's the first tangible step you would recommend?
I mean, I think like the first thing would be to start to be an observer of your thoughts. You know, if you're an observer of your thoughts, you're not your thoughts, right? You're watching your thoughts. Um, what are you saying throughout the day? When is it happening? We kind of go into this like autopilot, and if you're in a relation like typically people going into like divorce or in situations where their emotions are going up and down, like they can't tell you like what happened last week most of the time. So like slowing it down to just starting to pay attention, what's going on in your mind, like that is probably like like the simplest, like most gentle, like really giving yourself like that space to be able to do it. Another tangible step that I have, because I gave you the example where I'm like, okay, who's like, what do you like and what do you not like about your partner? Like, that's actually a really hard one for people. But what I have them do is I'll have them put like draw a box, and I will like say, okay, who do you have to be in this relationship? And I want you to put everything in the box of who you have to be in a relationship and what the part of you that's actually missing outside of the box. So if you always have to be like, you can never bring up any problems or you can't like deal with any, they can't deal with any confrontations, then you might like write in the box that you don't have a voice.
I
Mhm.
just dealt with this with a client. I just dealt with this, and literally, that's her biggest issue. She has no voice. They're parenting a young child together. And anything, how if you've raised kids, you know how difficult parenting is, let alone when you're in a tricky relationship. And every day you could fight, you could have a great relationship and argue with your spouse about raising kids and just the frustrations. And she's in this issue where she cannot address her spouse with any problems because it just derails into just complete chaos for a long, long time in front of the kid. It doesn't matter. She can't calm or regulate her soon to be ex. And that's what she said. She said, I feel like as long as I can stay in this marriage as long as I have no voice. And that's a big problem.
Well, and I think you can easily start to add on to it because people they have perfected what they need to do to be in the relationship they're in. Like, right? Like
Yeah.
they know that like there isn't safety in this relationship. So like and being able to like starting to put it on paper of like you are in like a container of who you have to be in this relationship in order to make it work. What part of yourself are you giving up just to put it down so you can see it?
So I'm watching a show right now that I feel like it was illustrating so much of these themes that we're talking about. So right now I am binging, and I don't know if you guys have seen any of this. Have you guys watched on Hulu The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives?
I
I said it
haven't.
like it was a
I
rhyme.
want to watch it so badly. Is it
Oh, it's
amazing?
so good. It's very, very good. And we could get into a whole conversation about it after because I'm like obsessed. But what's so interesting is for so many cultures, there is this aspect of your life is not that bad. This is what you do. It's fine, and these particular women, a lot of them, because in, you know, the in a lot of Mormon circles, you do get married very young. So they don't even know who they are yet. And then you are marrying somebody who in a lot of the Mormon circles, and I'm not making blanket statements because everything can be different in different relationships, but a lot of times it is a very like the husband is the boss. The husband sets the score. This is what you do. And these women are now that they've had 2 kids and they're just now maybe late 20s, maybe I think 2 of the women in the show are 30,
Oh,
and you're finding out and 2 of the women, 2 of the cast members, or no, 3 of them have already been divorced. And because they're like I think it's the whole idea of the show is that these women are trying to change the narrative of of the Mormon community, like how these women are. Like, you don't just have to be quiet. We can do these things and we can still be quote unquote good Mormons and live this life. But what's so interesting is how many of them are feeling so controlled. And you're watching these scenes break down and you're watching the way they interact with their husbands. And you see they're trying to force themselves into this box, right?
okay, but I have to be devil's advocate for 1 second because we have a lot of male listeners, and
Totally.
I am seeing this, we're seeing this shift in divorce law, and we've talked about it a little bit where women are kinda doing everything. They're going out, they're making the money, they're, doing these things, and then they're having to pay maintenance or alimony. But I'm also seeing a shift where because women are kinda stepping into these different roles, I've had a lot of clients lately who are male who are the ones being controlled by their female counterpart. So if you're a male listening, we got you. We've seen it all, and you're here, you're in the right place. So whether you're on Mormon Wives or not, this is the podcast for you because we've seen it.
Well, and here's what's interesting back to that show for a second, Morgan. I was about to call you Mormon. Morgan, not Mormon. These women, Morgan, who are controlled by their husbands, they're the breadwinners. They're the breadwinners because they all formed this community on TikTok. They call it Mom Talk, and they make so much money as influencers that they are supporting their families. I'm not joking. Like that is really how it is. They're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as influencers. It's wild. Yet culturally, a husband still calls the shots. Now, one of the things that we see in our community, Morgan, are men who are like, to your point, I keep giving and giving and giving, thinking that that's going to make her happy
Right.
and everything's going to be okay, which then it's like, I think there's this feeling of somebody has to be in charge. And I don't know, Hillary, like, does somebody have to be in charge? Is that the way that relationships really work? I don't know. But like, I think that the husband is like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm trying to give and give and give and make her happy, but now she's holding all the cards. She has all the power.
Yeah, I think you're actually talking about like an even greater issue when it comes to men. And I'm always really happy when I have like men as clients because we sort of take for granted as women that we have a great support system and we can talk about our feelings and things going on all the time. Men can be
Yep.
going through a divorce and they will go on the golf course for 4 hours and talk about sports and the weather. They have no one
Yeah.
to talk to.
You are so
Like,
right.
so like like they don't even come close to having any of these like conversations or even diving into them most of the time because they don't have
Yeah.
anyone to talk to.
Except for men who have been through it. I feel like men who have been through it, and I can say this about Steve, I just heard him say the other day to a friend, like, "Let me know if you need to talk." I'm like, "What's going on?" He's like, "I can tell that he's not okay." I'm like, "That's my guy. That's my man." Which is so great when you do recognize that there are some men out there who I think are willing to have those conversations, but right, I think so many. I mean, I don't know, Morgan, you're like the guy that you talked about before at the beginning of this, you said you have that male client who was going through this completely alone.
Yep. It's awful. It's awful to see. People don't want to burden people with it, or men don't want to usually burden their, friends, and they just want to be more surface. It's kind of rare to find men that are actually open and honest about what they're
Yeah.
going through. So I agree with you, Hillary. So Hillary, I want to talk to you briefly about the people out there that are thinking, I don't want to go to therapy because this like annoying sound in my brain and like the annoying thoughts that I have, they're not that annoying, number one. And number two, I'm afraid that if I go to therapy, then I'm basically just heading down that road of divorce and I'm not quite there yet. I don't even think I want to go there. What do you say to those types of people? Because I have this all the time.
Wow. I mean, I certainly would shop for the right therapist, because I think the right therapist, if you went in and you said that you're not sure what you're doing, you really just want like a place. If if you don't want to go to therapy, then I would highly recommend like finding a safe person to talk to. Because as soon as we like talk, and Brene Brown like is like the one that comes to mind when I think about like as soon as we start to say our secrets out loud, we take away the power of them. And they can have so much power if just because we're keeping them hidden. Of like
So
just that
true.
exhale of being able to have like a close friend that you feel safe with or a family member that you can actually say how you're really feeling.
Yep. And I want to say one thing legally. So a lot of people are really hesitant, that voice in their head, maybe they don't want to go to therapy, but they're like, I don't know if I need a divorce. I don't want to talk to a divorce lawyer. So I get a lot of calls where people will say, "Hi, I don't know why I'm calling you. Not quite sure. I'm really not ready for a divorce. As I'm not here for a divorce. I just, need some information." And I immediately calm them and I say, "Listen, that is what we're here for. Information is power. I'm here to give you information. I'm not pushing you down the road of divorce. Come in. Let's have an hour conversation. I'm going to give you information and you do with it what you feel appropriate. This is not the road to divorce either. This is the road for information gathering." So, whether you're thinking about meeting with a divorce lawyer or potentially a therapist, or maybe you're a girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever it is. I don't know. Probably don't want a boyfriend or a girlfriend if you're trying to figure out your marriage, but we
I
always
mean,
talk
you
about
might.
or you might. Those people think about it and you don't need to be have a black or white decision at that point just to open up. And like Hillary said, I love that. If you take away the power of those secrets, gosh, are you on the road to figuring life out?
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that I think it's that first step. And I do think that, I mean, this is just my opinion. If you don't want to go to therapy, I think you need to look at why. Why, you know? And I get that a friend might be easier, but I feel like sometimes the easier choice might not be the right choice. Maybe we do need to rip off that band-aid and really look at what we're trying to pretend is not happening. That's just my opinion. Take it or leave it, but it's coming from the woman who pretended for a very, very long time that, she was okay when she wasn't. So I want to recap because I think we threw a lot of information at everybody here. One of the things that I love that you said, Hillary, is that the first thing to do when when you realize, all right, I've been pretending and I need to stop pretending, or these women on this show told me I need to stop pretending. So the first thing that you do is to be an observer of your thoughts. Can we just go into a tiny bit more detail on what that actually looks like? Like, what do you want someone to do? Get out a pen and paper and write down what they're thinking?
No, I actually really want you to I mean, if you want to start journaling, that's actually more advanced than I would say, but really just
Okay.
recognize that you aren't your thoughts. So I'll give you I just met with somebody earlier who was saying I catastrophize. And I'm like, you don't catastrophize. A part of you catastrophizes. And how to start to put a little bit of separation into what part of your thoughts are showing up. If you
Yeah.
my favorite is Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. He describes this process beautifully. It's people really want to understand what does it mean to hear your thoughts. He will be literally say hello 3 times in your head and you can hear yourself say hello. Well, then you are not the one saying hello. You are the one listening to it. And this is such a huge piece for people to really, really remember that you aren't your thoughts. So every thought that goes into your head isn't a fact. And how to really realize okay, I only have all these thoughts at this time, or it shows up more when I'm really angry, or how do I start to really separate out who's who's showing up. Who are all these different pieces, and not necessarily diving in that you're just a mess, you're broken. I mean, that's my favorite. It's no one's broken,
Uh-huh.
you know?
No. It's kind of what you're saying makes so much sense, whether you're in this mess, whether you feel like a mess, whatever. I mean, I'm not in a divorce process. I'm a divorce lawyer, but I will tell you, I have people speaking in my head all the time. It could be a good day, it could be a bad day, I could be negative about something. I mean, the amount of thoughts that go through my head in one day is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But Hillary, I want to say to you, or ask you one thing. Is there a hidden danger of just continuing to say, I'm fine, everything's fine, we're all fine? Is there some kind of hidden danger that people should be aware of doing that consistently for a long period of time?
I mean, there's a lot of hidden dangers. I mean, I think one of them is that if you're living so far out of alignment with yourself, you're actually really not going to be able to be in touch with how you're really feeling. If you're telling yourself you're fine and you're not fine, your body won't know the difference anymore. So those red flags that you were talking about, they don't go off. You don't feel them as much. So that is a huge danger. You start to become a shell of yourself. essentially. Like, so that is a huge piece. Another one that, we haven't really talked about tons is like kids. Like, they really, they know. Like, people try and stay together for the kids and what have you, but the kids really know when you're not happy.
Oh, they know so much. Everybody, this is like what drives me crazy in these cases because I feel like everyone puts added pressure on themselves to stay together because the kids are in the house. And what I usually see is that the kids know, no matter whether you said it or not, they know. And they're so much happier if you're in a difficult situation or a tense household when that household is less tense. And I actually have kind of a funny story. I had a client who, was going through the divorce process, very hesitant to tell the kids, even in the middle of the divorce process. But everything that this client was telling me about what was going on in the house, I was telling this client, your kids know. Your kids know this is going to be not the biggest conversation with them because they know. And I think it took her about 8 or 9 months to work with therapists in conjunction with me, her divorce lawyer, to finally talk to the kids. Well, they finally talk to the kids. They sit them down. They have what they're going to say to them, yada, yada. Takes about 5 minutes. The kids basically say, yeah, we know. We've known for forever. Let's go get ice cream. Leaves the two parents like sitting there. They all leave to go get ice cream. And within 5 minutes, they have put it all over the internet. I knew my parents were getting divorced, and yep, here they are getting divorced. And so they were expecting this response that was so different. And their divorce was essentially announced to the entire world because the kids had been over it for about 5 years. They knew.
Oh
They
my
they know
god.
10 times more than you think they do. And you're also sort of like, so that's what they become familiar with, is you're modeling what not to do essentially at that point too.
Sure.
So, like, that is the danger, right? And then all the other areas of your life, whether it's like your work, how does it start to show up in every part of your life when you're not actually living like in your truth of where you want to be, you know?
Hillary, do you think that your divorce helps you really guide clients?
Like a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons that we love inviting you on is, our first conversation was so unique and you were so open about your own divorce and the fact that you're helping people so much through theirs, but also helping people get through a lot of other things that we didn't even like touch on today. And certain things that we talked about on the phone were, you're really great with addiction and people going through addiction and maybe a divorce or maybe just addiction. I mean, you have a lot of facets to your practice. And that was one thing combined with what you've been through that really kind of drew me into you and to invite you on this podcast.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think having gone through divorce, you think you know. You think you know like what it's about and like how long it takes and what the process is. And every phase of it is so uniquely different for every single person. But there is sort of like
Yeah.
there is some sort of like predictability of what people are going to go through at certain phases. And if you throw like addiction in there, it's going to be something else as well. But like, I think that having gone through it, it helps me navigate like and help my clients go through those places where it's like, oh my gosh, I like, you really don't know what you don't know. And I still don't know a ton about like the divorce stuff. I sit on like a committee every month and I like talk to divorce lawyers. Parent like coordinators and GALs. I'm like, I have tons of questions. I'm always like trying to like, because in the like the therapy room, we don't want to ever do anything that's going to jeopardize someone's divorce. So like always being really mindful of that space of working, alongside of that. I would never want to do something, that would be great in recovery, but not great for divorce.
Makes sense.
Listeners, I hope you loved hearing from Hillary as much as we loved having her on because you're going to hear a lot more from her this season. So, what Morgan just started to get at, we're bringing Hillary back to talk about a whole lot more. So lean in, buckle up, settle in, get used to this. Hillary, this was such an important conversation. Thank you so much for just beginning to help our listeners open their minds to the idea that things might not be okay. And that is okay. If someone's listening to this show and they are in the Chicagoland area or in Illinois and they really would love to know more about you and how they could work with you, what's the best way of somebody getting in touch?
They can go to my practice's website, which is at millenniumhope.com, or they can reach me on my number, which is 773. Oh,
Ooh, a phone number,
yes.
guys. Oh my
I know.
goodness. Oh my goodness. Hillary, you're gonna have to tell us all the messages that come through. And we'll share them on our social media. No, we won't. We're just kidding. We would never. Hillary, thank you,
Thank you
thank
so
you,
much.
thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Okay, have you ever had a guest give out her cell phone number? We had to beep that out. I don't know if you were getting calls in the middle of the night asking what attachment style or whether their brain is offline. Like, please help me.
She's like, and my home address is like someone knocking on her door. Hi, sorry to bother you. This is what my childhood was like. What do you think? But she's so nice. She'd be like, okay, come on in. Let me get
She
you a
would.
drink. We'll
She
figure
would.
this out together.
Well, it's funny because after we stopped the podcast, we asked her, we were like, thank you for giving your phone number out. Like, that's so nice. Thinking it was her office phone number. But no, she was the best trying to give out her cell phone. And we were like, time out. We're not doing that.
Oh, I love her. Okay. So I don't even know how to wrap that conversation because there was so much there. I think that the biggest takeaway is you got to start somewhere. And if starting by recognizing that you are not your thoughts and looking at, I mean, really, there's nothing good is going to come from pretending that you're okay. But I will say that admitting you're not okay does not mean that you walk into the next PTO meeting of your kid's school with a box of tissues and a bottle of vodka saying, like, oh, my marriage is falling apart.
Or you do. And then you come see me because there's a lot more shit happening. No, I'm just kidding. I'm lightening it up. I'm lightening it up. But what I took away from this is you're not alone. You're not alone at all. I also take away the fact that she said that big thoughts, those thoughts that are just like the ones that you try to like push down and
Yeah.
never talk about, when you say those, it takes away their power.
Yeah.
So, be careful with who you want to say it to, but I think always say it. It's so impressive when you do say it and you get a reaction that's like, wait, you're not upset about that, or you're not thinking I'm crazy. And then you start to feel more comfortable. So I would say to anybody listening, if you're in that weird in between, talk to somebody. That doesn't mean that you're going to jump from, I have weird thoughts or my thoughts are bad to I'm getting
Right.
divorced or I need to break up with this person. That's not what we're suggesting at all. What we're suggesting is, if you have those intrusive thoughts that are continuing to come into your brain, you might want to think about it. The other takeaway I would say is that my cold continues to get worse during this podcast. So if my Chicago nasal accent has been worse as we go on, I am very sorry for that. I need to take my brain offline tonight and
You're
just
dysregulated.
get my regulation together here.
And I've got to go get my dysregulated children to bed because I'm actually terrified. I'm really hoping that my kids are already asleep, or maybe they're lying in bed watching The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, but if they have lost my place, so help me God, because I'm so obsessed with this show, guys, and I say this all the time as we wrap. When you are going through a phase that is really emotionally and mentally uncomfortable, you need to give your brain breaks. You
Yep.
can't think about this stuff all the time. I don't care how emotionally evolved you want to be, you got to give your brain a break. So, if you're a reader, then set a time every night that you turn your brain off and you pick up your book. If you're a reality TV show watcher like me, find a show, set a time every night that you are done and you put on the show. Um, it can really help you and you really deserve that. So whether you're going to binge the secret lives of Mormon wives or not, find something that you can do because you need it and you deserve it. And we hope that our show can be another thing that you do. Maybe it's not going to be part of giving your brain a break because we're sitting here talking to you about divorce, but we're not here to judge you. We're here to guide you and we'll be with
Agreed.
you.
Yep, and we're gonna have Hillary back because she was fantastic. I loved having Hillary
Loved her.
because number 1, she's real. She's been through it herself. There's nothing to be said about a guest that, comes on, has the credentials, but also has been through it themselves. So I give her kudos. Thank you for coming on, Hillary. But I want to ask you as listeners, knowing that she's coming back on, knowing her background, what she said, if you have questions that you want answered by Hillary on further episodes this season, send us a message, send us a direct message. We answer all of them. We consider all of your ideas and we try to loop them into our shows. If you like our show, please like us, review us. It means the world. Share it with your ex. We don't even care. We just want to help people. And remember, every day going through this is not a good day. And that is okay. Andrea and I always talk about the fact that sometimes it's day by day, other days it's hour by hour. And if you're at the minute by minute, God bless. Get out there, take a walk, find a girlfriend, find a guy friend, turn on the weird Mormon wives that I haven't seen, but
So we heard more.
whatever you got to do, whatever you got to do. Because listen, divorce isn't easy. It's a marathon, it isn't a sprint. But when you are struggling, we are there for you. So remember, you have got this and we have got you.